ॐ नमो भगवते श्रीरमणाय करुणापूर्णसुदाब्धे कबलितघनविश्वरूपकिरणावल्या अरुणाचलपरमात्मन् अरुणो भवचित्तकञ्जसुविकासाय वन्दे श्रीरमणऋषे आचार्यस्य पदाब्जम् यो मे दर्शयधीशम् भान्तं ध्वान्तमतीत्यः अखण्डसच्चिदानन्दे परब्रह्मण्यलौकिके विलसन्तं गुरुं नौमिं सर्वदा हृद्यहं भजे. Day by Day with Bhagavan, episode number 24, 30-10-1946. This morning, Dr. S. Rao, Anantachari and Balaram returned from their trip to Madura and Tiruchuri. Dr. Rao had brought with him Dosai Prasad from Alagar Koyal near Madura. Bhagavan had several times told us of this dosai. That is why Dr. Rao was so particular about bringing it. Bhagavan partook of it with relish and spoke of the days when he used to eat it frequently. Bhagavan was kind enough to make enquiries about Karpura Bhattar and was glad to hear that K's wife in full pregnancy attended to our party's comforts, etc., and was confined just the day before Balaram left Tiruchuri. Balaram said the labor was easy and the child was a female one, and that the lady's mother arrived just in time to assist at the confinement. The morning Tapal brought a letter from Victoria Doe saying that she had met Swami Siddheshwarananda in London. Curiously, the same post brought a letter from Swami S saying that he had arrived in India and was in his native place. 1/11/1946. Mrs. Thalayar Khan took a lot of pains and arranged for Harishchandra, a Tamil film, to be shown to Bhagavan in the dining hall this night. The show could not be started before 9:30 p.m. and so Bhagavan had to keep awake till 12:30. But Bhagavan sat through it all and I believe he enjoyed it. 2/11/46. Bhagavan looked up Harishchandra's story in Tamil and said they had abridged the story very much at one place. They did not show how Chandramati was suspected of having killed the king's son and was sentenced to death for that supposed murder of hers. In the afternoon, Bhagavan was looking into the life of Pundarika in Bhakta Vijayam. The Tamil film Bhakta Pundarika was going to be shown this night to him. There is a lot of difference between the story in the book and the film version. 3/11/46. This afternoon, I read out in the hall a letter received from Mr. K. K. Nambiyar. Besides describing the air journey, which was made at a great height with snow-capped mountains beneath them in the flight, the letter described his meeting Mrs. E. Noy and her sister, how Mrs. E. N. was greatly moved by KKN's presence, how they all meditated for a while on Bhagavan, and how Mrs. E. N. shed copious tears. She was trying her best to come here again. This night, Bhagavan was shown a Hindi film, Karna. 4/11/46. Today, a letter was received from Mrs. E. Noy about Mr. KKN's visit to her and her sister, and how they all felt that Bhagavan was actually present with them. 5/11/46. This night, the film Mirabai was shown to Bhagavan. 6/11/46. As it was proposed that tonight the film Sivakavi should be shown, Bhagavan took up Pulavar Puranam, story of the poets, and read out portions to us. When he came to the stanza in which it is said that the poet fell repenting at Subramania's feet and said, I would not care for you, still such was your grace that you of your own accord appeared before me, set me right, and took me into your grace. How can I thank you for your mercy? Bhagavan could hardly restrain his tears. He was choked with emotion. I have often observed how such things move him deeply. Bhagavan is having a very bad cold. When somebody said, probably sitting late last night to see the film has affected Bhagavan's health, he said, No, I sat there as I sit here. Part of the time I was sleeping there. Further, they themselves give so many intervals. Whenever the reel was not moving, I closed my eyes. That gives me sufficient rest. Even if I sit for the whole night like that, it would make no difference to me. 7/13/11/46. Bhagavan has been having a bad cold, slight cough, and fever for 2 or 3 days. 18/11/46. The following was supplied to me by Mr. G.V. Subbarao. A visitor introduced by TSR asked Bhagavan whether, by doing annual ceremonies etc. to the dead, we can confer any benefit on them. To this, Bhagavan replied, Yes, it all depends on one's belief. Mr. Somasundaram Pillai's version of the above question and answer is given below. Question. If such rites as the annual ceremony performed by descendants are able to do away with the karma of the dead, it seems to strike at the root of the theory of karma. For then, a man may escape the evil consequences of his bad acts through the help of the rites performed by his sons, etc. Answer. Such rites only help the deceased to a small extent. It is on the same principle that prayaschittam and good deeds are said to mitigate the evil consequences of one's bad actions. After the visitor went away, I asked Bhagavan, Till 3 years ago, I was under the impression that doing annual ceremonies to the dead would confer benefit on them so long as they are not reborn. Bhagavan intervened with the remark, They will receive benefit though they are reborn several times, and there is an agency to look after all this. Of course, Jnana Marga does not say all this. After a while, I said, Bhagavan used to say that if one believes in the existence of this world, one should also believe in the existence of other worlds. Bhagavan said that it was so. I asked, the Jnani transcends all stages and he is not bound by any karma, vidhi or nisheda. The Ajnani should do his own dharma prescribed by Shastras till he gets Jnana. But while he is attempting to reach Jnana, will he be held responsible for the consequences of not doing the ordinary karma, or will he be presumed to have done all this karma just as a person reading in a higher class is presumed to have finished the lower classes? Bhagavan said, it depends on the superiority of the path one pursues. Unless a person has finished in this or previous births the other paths, he will not pursue the Jnana path. And he need not bother himself that he has not done the various karmas prescribed by Shastras, but he should not willfully transgress the Shastraic injunctions by doing things prohibited by them. 19:11:46. About 10:30 a.m. today, a visitor asked Bhagavan, the realized man has no further karma. He is not bound by his karma. Why should he still remain with his body? Bhagavan replied, who asks this question? Is it the realized man or the Ajnani? Why should you bother what the Jnani does or why he does anything? You look after yourself. A little later he added, you are under the impression you are the body. So you think the Jnani also has a body. Does the Jnani say he has a body? He may look to you as having a body and doing things with the body as others do. The burnt rope still looks like a rope, but it can't serve as a rope if you try to bind anything with it. So long as one identifies oneself with the body, all this is difficult to understand. That is why it is sometimes said in reply to such questions, the body of the Jnani will continue till the force of Prarabdha works itself out, and after the Prarabdha is exhausted, it will drop off. An illustration made use of in this connection is that of an arrow already discharged, which will continue to advance and strike its target. But the truth is, the Jnani has transcended all karmas, including the Prarabdha karma, and he is not bound by the body or its karmas. The visitor also asked, when a man realizes the self, what will he see? Bhagavan replied, there is no seeing. Seeing is only being. The state of self-realization, as we call it, is not attaining something new or reaching some goal which is far away, but simply being that which you always are and which you always have been. All that is needed is that you give up your realization of the not true as true. All of us are realizing, that is, regarding as real that which is not real. We have only to give up this practice on our part. Then we shall realize the self as the self, or in other words, be the self. At one stage, one would laugh at oneself that one tried to discover the self which is so self-evident. So, what can we say to this question? That stage transcends the seer and the seen. There is no seer there to see anything. The seer who is seeing all this now ceases to exist, and the self alone remains. 23:11:46. A letter was received from Dr. Mies in which he has described all his doings and experiences at Madura and Tiruchuri. He says there, besides other things, I went from the place where the river has joined the ocean, Tiruvannamalai, to the source of the river, Tiruchuri, past the place where the river came down as a waterfall to the level of the ocean, Madura. 24:11:46. Mrs. Chenoy from Bombay asked Bhagavan this evening, after reading Who Am I, whether it was the proper thing to do if she asked herself, Who am I? And told herself she was not this body but a spirit, a spark from the divine flame. Bhagavan first said, Yes, you might do that or whatever appeals to you. It will come right in the end. But after a little while, he told her, There is a stage in the beginning when you identify yourself with the body, when you are still having the body consciousness. At that stage, you have the feeling you are different from the reality or God, and then it is you think of yourself as a devotee of God or as a servant or lover of God. This is the first stage. The second stage is when you think of yourself as a spark of the divine fire or a ray from the divine sun. Even then, there is still that sense of difference and the body consciousness. The third stage will come when all such difference ceases to exist and you realize that the self alone exists. There is an I which comes and goes, and another I which always exists and abides. So long as the first I exists, the body consciousness and the sense of diversity or Bheda Buddhi will persist. Only when that I dies, the reality will reveal itself. For instance, in sleep, the first I does not exist. You are not then conscious of a body or the world. Only when that I again comes up as soon as you get out of sleep do you become consciousness of the body and this world. But in sleep, you alone existed. For when you wake up, you are able to say, I slept soundly. You that wake up and say so are the same that existed during sleep. You don't say that the I which persisted during sleep was a different I from the I present in the waking state. That I which persists always and does not come and go is the reality. The other I which disappears in sleep is not real. One should try and realize in the waking state that state which unconsciously everyone attains in sleep, the state where the small I disappears and the real I alone is. At this stage, Mrs. C asked, But how is it to be done? Bhagavan replied, By enquiring from whence and how does this small I arise. The root of all Bheda Buddhi is this I. It is at the root of all thoughts. If you enquire where from it arises, it disappears. Mrs. C then asked, Am I not then to say, in answer to my own question, Who am I? I am not this body, but a spirit, etc. Bhagavan then said, No, the enquiry, Who am I, means really the enquiry within oneself as to where from within the body the I thought arises. If you concentrate your attention on such an enquiry, the I thought being the root of all other thoughts, all thoughts will be destroyed, and then the self or the big I alone will remain as ever. You do not get anything new or reach somewhere where you were not before. When all other thoughts which were hiding the self are removed, the self shines by itself. Mrs. C then referred to the portion of the book, Who Am I, where it is said, even if you keep on saying I, it will take you to the self or reality, and asked whether that was not the proper thing to be done. I explained, the book says one must try and follow the inquiry method, which consists in turning one's thoughts inwards and trying to find out where from the I, which is the root of all thoughts, arises. If one finds one is not able to do it, one may simply go on repeating I as if it were a mantram like Krishna or Rama, which people use in their japa. The idea is to concentrate on one thought to exclude all other thoughts, and then eventually even the one thought will die. On this, Mrs. C asked me, will it be of any use if one simply repeats I mechanically? I replied, when one uses I or other words like Krishna, one surely has in one's own mind some idea of the God one calls by the name I or anything else. When a man goes on repeating Rama or Krishna, he can't be thinking of a tree as the meaning behind it. After all this, Bhagavan said, now you consider you are making an effort and uttering I or other mantrams and making meditation. But when you reach the final stage, meditation will go on without any effort on your part. You can't get away from it or stop it, for meditation, japa, or whatever else you call it, is your real nature. 27/11/46. In the afternoon, when I entered the hall, Nagamma has just finished reading a Telugu article entitled Vinnapalu Submissions, written by Mr. Venkatachalam, father of Sauris, appearing in the Telugu journal Andhra Shilpi. I requested Mr. GVS to translate it. The gist of it was a complaint that Bhagavan, after enabling Venkatachalam to have a few experiences in the beginning, seems to have grown utterly indifferent and to have completely neglected and ignored him since. The article goes on like a loving child quarreling with its beloved father or master, and in one portion says, do you think I am not aware how necessary I am for you? If I don't have you, I have all this world and its enjoyments with which I could occupy and console myself. But what can you do without the love of your devotees, as you depend solely on such love and devotion? Some people, including Nagamma, did not like this way of writing. Mrs. Chenoy, for instance, asked, but why are you all making so much fuss about this silly letter? I explained to her that others did not think the letter so silly, that so far as I could judge, even Bhagavan did not think so, and that other devotees, long before Venkatachalam, have sometimes quarrelled with God and even abused him for what seemed utter indifference to their urgent supplications, that it was a passing phase in the devotee's life who would feel remorse at the very next moment and feel grateful to God for various mercies he has had, and so on. Bhagavan said, it seems Venkatachalam has written another article in this vein and that Nagamma has seen it. But she has not shown it to me. He asked Nagamma, where is that article? She replied, I don't know where it is, I have thrown it away. She added that she had shown it to Mauni and that he also disapproved of it. It looks as though Nagamma and Mauni, having gone through the article, decided it was not fit to be taken to the hall for Bhagavan's perusal. But so far as I could judge, Bhagavan wants to see it. 28/11/46. This evening, just before Parayana, a Telugu gentleman wrote a few questions and presented them to Bhagavan. Bhagavan replied to him. The questions in effect were: they say that Jivan Muktas are always having Brahmakara Vritti. Would they be having it during sleep? If they have it, then who is it that sleeps in their case? Answer. Of course, the Jivan Muktas are having Brahmakara Vritti always, even during sleep. The real answer to the last question and the whole set of questions is that the Jnani has neither the waking, dreaming, or sleeping avasthas but only the Turiya state. It is the Jnani that sleeps, but he sleeps without sleeping or is awake while sleeping. 8/12/46. A French official from Pondicherry has been here for 2 days and he told Bhagavan that he intended giving up his job and doing some sadhana in the spiritual line. As usual, Bhagavan told him it was not necessary to give up one's job or renounce the world or go to a forest, etc., to do any sadhana, and that wherever one might be and whatever duties one might be discharging in one's office or family, one could still practice sadhana. I was not present at the above conversation, but Mrs. Osborne told me about it. 25/12/46. I was away at Madras from the 13th and returned last night. This evening at about 6:30, our Framji's brother's son, who has been staying here for about a month with his wife and child, came with his party to take leave of Bhagavan as they intended leaving for Bombay the next morning. Mother and son stood near Bhagavan's feet and TSR told Bhagavan that the party had come to take leave. The child, about 3 years old, went up to Bhagavan and stood near him close to the grating. Bhagavan graciously took hold of the boy's right arm and shook it and let him go. He went back to his mother and, as they were prostrating, said something to her in Gujarati. Bhagavan asked what it was all about. The mother said, "He is saying Bhagavan did not place his hands on his head and bless him." Bhagavan was surprised at this remark of the child. The mother took advantage of this situation and told her son to go near Bhagavan. Bhagavan began saying, "I have touched his arm, it is enough." But the child had come up to him and put his head across the grating. Bhagavan touched his head and remarked, "I thought he would be satisfied with my having touched and fondled him, but he persists and wants this." 26/12/46. This afternoon, Colombo Ramachandra put into my hands an article in English which he had been preparing for the last 2 or 3 days as suggested by our Mauni to be sent in response to a request for an article from the assistant editor, Hindu Organ, English, and Hindu Sandhanam, Tamil, and asked me to show it to Bhagavan for approval. I showed the article to Bhagavan, but as I found he was not inclined to go through the long article, I offered to read it out to him, and he heartily approved of the idea, saying, "Yes, others also can hear it then." Thereupon I read it out. As requested by R, I also gave for Bhagavan's perusal the above letter from the assistant editor, as it contained some personal matter meant apparently for Bhagavan's notice and seeking relief through Bhagavan's grace. I also told Bhagavan that while the above article was to be sent to the Hindu organ, Uma's Tamil article on Bhagavan, written at the time of the Golden Jubilee in September this year, but so far not published, was going to be sent by R to the Hindu Sandhanam. Uma has written a new poem for the Jayanti on the 7th January, and this is also going to be sent to Hindu Sandhanam. 27/12/46. This night, a gentleman quoting a few stanzas from Tamil works like Tiruppugar and those of Thayumanavar and Manikya Vajagar wanted to know whether, as he had been told by a certain teacher of his in interpreting these passages, the proper way to attain salvation was to see to it that the body did not die, drop off from the weird life, and get destroyed, but that it gradually became less and less and finally vanished, merging into the Supreme. The gentleman prefaced his remarks with the submission that he was without eye, that is, understanding, non katralor ur eripolave, that is, like a bull roaming about without eyes, and that he prayed for enlightenment. Bhagavan asked him, "Have you not got eyes?" He replied, "I want the eye which would enable me to see what is the body and what is the soul." Bhagavan, you say this, you have a body and you say my body, etc. How do you see all this? Visitor, with the fleshy eye, Unakkan, I lead the life of egoism. Bhagavan, exactly. So, to see where from this ahamkara rises and to go back to its source is the only way. You wanted the way. This is the only way, to go back by the same way by which you came. You said Periyor Ponavari, the way which the great ones of old trod. They all used only this way. Because you asked which way, I replied, the way by which you came. The visitor still pointed out that his teacher, basing himself on various texts from the above authors, had taught him that the proper yoga is to see that the body does not die. Bhagavan, people put various interpretations on the same texts according to their pet theories. You quote, for instance, from Manikya Vachagar and say he used the way advocated by your teacher, the way in which the soul weir is to be made to leave the body by the 10th gate and not by the 9 gates. Can you point out a single line in that saint's works where the phrase 10th gate occurs? You said the great ones used this yoga. What is the Viyoga, separation from? Who got that Viyoga and who wants to achieve yoga, union again? That must first be known. The visitor also asked in the course of his long talk, how else is the Jiva, individual soul, to join Shivam, God? How is the Jivatman to become one with the Paramatman? Bhagavan said, we do not know anything about Shiva or the Paramatman. we know the Jiva, or rather, we know we exist. I am is the only thing that always abides, even when the body does not exist for us, as for instance when we are asleep. Let us take hold of this and see where from the I sense or ahankara, as you put it, arises. The visitor asked Bhagavan, I am asked to go the way by which I came. Then what will happen? Bhagavan replied, if you go away. That is all. There is nothing more. You won't come back. Because you asked which way, I said the way you came. But who are you? Where are you now? And where do you want to go? That one may show the way. All these questions will have to be first answered. So, the most important thing is to find out who you are. Then all else will be solved. Mr. TSR found in the visitor's hands a book by his master Tirunagalinga Swami entitled Atma Rakshamrita Adhara Kattalai, and having looked at it for a minute, passed it on to Bhagavan. Bhagavan glanced at its contents for a few minutes and then returned it. He said, there has been a school like that which went about saying that he who left his body behind could not be a jnani or a perfected being. But all those who said so have also left their body behind at death. The visitor, however, still said, I prefer to believe literally what is said of a saint like Sundaramurti, that he did not leave his body behind but went on the white elephant sent from heaven for taking him there. The above is only a poor attempt to give the gist of a long talk between the visitor and Bhagavan. This evening, another visitor, a young and bright-looking man, Girish Ganapat, read out a long prayer to Bhagavan which he had composed in English, consisting of about 20 stanzas, and then gave it to Bhagavan. Bhagavan received the same very graciously after listening to it with appreciative smiles all along. I extract below 5 out of the above stanzas. In search of truth I wandered, but found nothing but confusion. With hopeful eyes I arrived here, expecting light to avoid illusion. Came I and sat at your feet, peace and calmness captured self. In an unseen way, O Lord, you helped me in your wondrous silence. Light of hope cheered me, I saw my dream succeed. Oh, see with the sword of stillness, or cut the veils of darkness. Yet, O Lord, my sinful soul is not free from old habits, hence the help from you, Guru, begging I am with eager eyes. So will you not help me, O Lord? Will my childish prayer reach thy ear, O merciful Ramana? And will my veils mysterious drop by your single ray serene? The above young man took a copy of Colombo Ramachandran's article, see under date 26/12/46, and said he was going to make a translation of it into Gujarati and get it published in a Gujarati paper. 31/12/46. A visitor asked Bhagavan, what is the right conception of life? Bhagavan, if you know who wants to have this cleared, that is, who puts this question, then all will be solved. What is meant by life, by right conception, and who are you? Visitor, I am a man. I want to know what is the right conception of life so that I may live accordingly. Bhagavan, life of man is what is. That which is is. All the trouble arises by having a conception of it. Mind comes in. It has a conception. All trouble follows. If you are as you are, without a mind and its conceptions about various things, all will be well with you. If you seek the source of the mind, then alone all questions will be solved. Another visitor asked Bhagavan, will not right conduct be enough to secure salvation? Bhagavan, salvation for whom? Who wants salvation? And what is the right conduct? What is conduct? And what is right? Who is to judge what is right and what is wrong? According to previous samskaras, each one regards something or other as right. It is only when the reality is known what is right can be known. The best course is to find out who wants this salvation, and in tracing this who or ego to its original source consists all right conduct. This answer did not satisfy the visitor, and he kept on asking whether doing nitya karmas and sat karmas will not lead to salvation as mentioned in books. Thereupon Bhagavan said, it is said so in books. Who denies that good conduct is good or that it will eventually lead you to the goal? Good conduct or satkarma purifies the chitta or mind and gives you chitta suddhi. The pure mind attains jnana, which is what is meant by salvation. So eventually jnana must be reached. That is, the ego must be traced to its source. But to those to whom this does not appeal, we have to say Satkarma leads to Chitta Suddhi, and Chitta Suddhi will lead to right knowledge or Jnana, and that in its turn gives salvation. 1:147. An old lady, a Brahmin widow, was talking to Bhagavan in the hall, recollecting various incidents connected with her family and Bhagavan during Bhagavan's stay in Virupaksha cave and Skandashramam. Thereupon I asked TSR who the lady was. He said she was the widow of one Mr. Venkatramayar of Madura, who stayed with Bhagavan for a long time and was greatly attached to Bhagavan. Thereupon Bhagavan asked me, haven't you met him? His photo must be in our groups in the life. I said no. Then Bhagavan asked TSR to get a copy of the first edition of Self-Realization by BVN, took out a group photo, second Jayanti, and showed us the above Mr. V. Iyer in that group. The lady began singing some Tamil songs. Among them were Ramanastuti Panchakam songs. In this connection, TSR asked Bhagavan how many times the author of those songs had visited Bhagavan and where he was now. Bhagavan replied, he came only once when we were at the Virupaksha cave. The first 4 songs he wrote while he was here, one each day of his stay. And the 5th, the Sadguru song, he sent after going to his place. He never again came here and we know nothing more about him. The day he wrote the Kummi song, Mr. M. V. Ramaswamy Iyer, probably Ramanatha Dikshitar and others, all crazy chaps, Paitiyanga, joined together at night and sang this song and did Kummi. Afterwards, the lady began singing a few extracts from Bharati's Kannan song. She began Pizhaikkum Vazhisolla Vendiyendral. At once Bhagavan asked the lady, do you know Alamelu? She used to sing this song. The lady replied, "Yes, I know. It is through her I got acquainted with this song," and continued her song. I was going through a book on Ma Anandamayi recently received by the ashramam. On pages 127 to 129 of the book, the question is put as to whether she is to be deemed to be in the superconscious state, knowing all, when she speaks in the ordinary way of the world, asking her disciples when they came whether they have had their food or how their family was, etc. She replied that in that superconscious state there could be no conversation and no duality in fact, and that when she converses, she does so like other persons and not with all knowledge. But she added, there is another state when whatever I tell any particular person will be true. I asked Bhagavan what was this state and what was its name. Bhagavan said, I don't know what they mean by it. Some are able to see what is hidden by time or space, but that is among the siddhis so called, and nothing to do with jnana or liberation of the perfected being. 4.1.47. This afternoon, TSR was pasting in the file opened for 1947 a copy of Uma's song printed for the coming Jayanti with Colombo K. Ramachandra's song at the top. Nagamma asked Bhagavan, has the song been printed? How has it been done? On a single sheet or as a folder? Bhagavan replied, it has been done as a small folder with KR's song on top, and asked TSR to show it to N. In this connection, Bhagavan told TSR, KR has not put his signature to the song but has subscribed himself as a devotee. You may perhaps note down there K. Ramachandra to indicate who the author was for any reference in the future. Later, Bhagavan told me, R's article has appeared in the Sunday Times. Bhagavan asked me to read it out for the benefit of all. R had referred to siddhis as subnormal powers. With Bhagavan's approval, I corrected it into supranormal powers. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Sarvam Sri Ramanarpanamastu. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi.